Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
Hillary Clinton wants to abolish it, believe me. She wants to abolish our Second Amendment.
I think they didn't deny it. I don't think anybody denied it.
Other presidents did not call. They'd write letters, and some presidents didn't do anything.
Many people have come out and said I'm right.
You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Hello and welcome to Fallacious Trump, the podcast where we use the insane ramblings of Pol Pot Belly to explain logical fallacies. I'm your host, Jim.
And I'm your other host, Mark. A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that results in bad or invalid arguments. And the logical fallacy we're looking at this week is conflating views.
Yeah, so this is a multiple of 11 this episode.
Yay.
We're on episode 88.
Yeah.
And on the 11s, for reasons that are lost in the mist of time,
reasons that elude sense.
Yeah, I like to do a fallacy which was previously unnamed, but I have identified and given a
I like
name
that.
to.
I like that. Normally you just say, here's one I made up, which doesn't sound quite as, kind of academic and studious, but one that's been previously unnamed, very good.
Yeah.
Like that.
So this one is one that I have noticed in the wild and have decided to give a name because I couldn't find what this equated to in other lists of logical fallacies.
It's a new species.
It is, yeah. So this is where people, as part of their argument, make a claim that a group or a person has an opinion or has expressed an opinion when really they're talking about the opinions of another person who might be part of the same group or another group that isn't necessarily affiliated with those people. So they're conflating the views of more than one people or the actions of more than one person and suggesting that
therefore
gives them the right to kind of call that out as some kind of hypocrisy or lie and strengthens their argument.
Yes, exactly. Use it as a basis for some outrageous policy decision that they're about to make.
So it can be a bit of a straw man sometimes because you're kind of claiming that a person holds a view or has said something that individual didn't necessarily say because they're affiliated with a group that other members of that group might have said that.
But with a straw man, you're doing that in order to do down that.
Yeah, so make it an easier argument to battle with, whereas in this case you're doing it to kind of suggest that the person is either being disingenuous or lying or being hypocritical.
Or is as bad as the other lot that you're lumping them in with.
Yeah, a certain amount of guilt by association is in there as well.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, the first example is from Trump talking about the wall that he definitely didn't build in... well, actually, he's talking here in New Mexico, but he's talking about the wall in San Diego.
Sheriffs and commissioners from 9 Mexico counties recently sent a letter to your state's congressional delegation begging them to vote for strong border security. They want in New Mexico. They don't want open borders. They don't want criminals pouring into your communities and doing what they do, and we won't even talk about that. They want strong... These are people that are with you, in many cases Democrats. They write letters, we need strong border security. In San Diego, California is very difficult, always complaining, not doing great. But they wanted a wall in San Diego. Good mayor in San Diego, by the way. They wanted a wall. And I said, you know what, let's build it someplace else because California, once we build it, they'll complain. But then I said, the people are pouring in. They needed it. They're pouring into San Diego, like going all over the place. And people that had houses, they didn't like people running over their gardens all day long, coming in from the other side. So we put up a wall, and I thought everybody would be happy. As soon as it was finished, the day it was finished, I was notified, we didn't want the wall. Why did you do the wall? And I will tell you, in other words, it's all a game.
So he's saying people he said Mexico, but he means New Mexico. Sheriffs and commissioners of 9 counties in New Mexico sent a letter quite recently, as before this was happening, demanding stronger border security, which is
Gets
true.
a cheer.
That did happen.
Yeah.
And it was a bipartisan group of sheriffs and commissioners. But he didn't build a wall in that area in Mexico. He didn't. I mean, he barely built a wall in San Diego. He replaced some dilapidated fencing that existed previously in San Diego.
People are pouring in, doing things we won't even talk about.
We won't even talk about it.
Because I've got no facts to back anything up.
But he's saying, basically, that because people in New Mexico wanted it, and he built it in California, and the people in California said, we didn't want it, that somehow, that means it's all a game. That means no one really says what they mean.
Yeah, so is the implication that the people in New Mexico who say they want a wall don't really mean that they want the wall?
Kind of.
Is he doing that? He's kind of lumping them in with the people that complained about the wall that they got.
I think he's saying that everyone wants a wall, but once you do it, they'll say they didn't want it. That's what he's...
right.
Yeah, they're being disingenuous in afterwards by saying they didn't really want it. And you know, you can't please them, basically, is what he's trying to say.
Wall the builders all the time.
And he does pause to suggest that the people in San Diego wanted a wall. There's not a huge amount of evidence of that. But more importantly, it could be that some people in San Diego did want a wall. And then he replaced the dilapidated wall with new wall. And other people said, why did you do that? The wall we had there was perfectly good. It didn't really make much difference to the amount of people coming through and so on. And he still sees that as people kind of saying, oh, they're just they're saying they didn't want it.
So it's a kind of multi-layered thing. This conflating thing.
Yeah, I mean
it's a catch-all.
He did it
you can blame
kind of twice in that because he very explicitly conflated New Mexico with California, but also kind of just claiming that the people who said they didn't want it afterwards were the same people who said they wanted it before, and that means that sometimes this one needs a bit of research. Part of where this one came from was when we were talking about the shooting on the set of Rust and people having a go at Alec Baldwin. And I said in that episode, these are the same people who defended Kyle Rittenhouse.
Right.
And when I kind of thought about that in my prep for the episode, I thought, are they the same people? Or are they do I just expect them to be the kind of people who defended Rittenhouse? And I looked up, things that people were saying against Alec Baldwin and what those people had said about Rittenhouse. Yeah. And I found multiple examples of people.
That you were right. Yeah.
There were people who, like, for example, Candace Owens spoke out about Baldwin. I couldn't find anything she'd said about Rittenhouse with a quick search.
Right.
But there were lots of other examples of people who had, in one case said this gun owner who shot people was perfectly responsible, and yet this person who shouldn't have been in a position where there was a live gun in his hand was completely irresponsible and is a murderer. But it did take the research for me to figure out that they were the right people, the same people.
Yes.
And it's very easy to say. There's a very common thing for Republicans or for Democrats to say about Republicans, and I'm sure I've said it, certainly think it, that the people who claim to be very pro-life are also happy with executions and stuff like that, happy with capital punishment.
Yeah.
I'm reasonably sure there's a good number of examples of that, of people who would say they were pro-life but are in favour of capital punishment.
But just to say, Republicans, they're the kind of people that is actually a conflation of views, and it's a bit like we were talking about at the heart of, much of the heart of the QAnon theories, conspiracies are that people will just say this is the kind of thing you would expect from those kind of people. Yeah. Therefore, I'm going to not question that, despite all the appeals to do your own research. I don't have to bother because that's the kind of thing I would expect them to be like.
Yeah. So there's a bit of hasty generalization in there. which we've talked about in the past. There's a few different fallacies that kind of factor in here.
Yep.
So our second example comes from a telly rally that Trump was holding in the kind of run-up to the election in 2020, and he said this about Biden.
Biden has vowed to defund the police and take away your guns. In Biden America, you and your family will never be safe.
Biden absolutely did not vow at all in any way to defund the police or take away your guns.
No. Just like Hillary didn't want to, take away the Second Amendment or any of that. Yeah.
There were other Democrats who were in favour of defunding the police. And that phrase, defunding the police, gets warped massively by people depending on which side of the debate they're on. Yep. But even then, there were some Democrats, not even necessarily the same Democrats who were in favour of defunding the police, who were in favour of taking away guns to some extent. Yeah. Although that's quite a fringe belief in or at least stated belief in the Democratic Party. In fact, there's a meme. These things like me and then a picture, also me, and then a picture that kind of contradicts it. And there's one that I found which had Democrats and a picture of Hillary Clinton saying, "I am not here to take away your guns," and then also Democrats with Beto O'Rourke saying, "Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15," which is kind of representative of what those people have said, and they are both Democrats, but they're not the same person. So all that demonstrates is that two Democrats have different views about an issue. That doesn't demonstrate the hypocrisy of Democrats or the fact that Hillary really did want to take away your guns and she was lying when she said she didn't. Those are two different people.
And actually, frighteningly, if I'm not conflating a view, what it does illustrate is that the Republicans speak with one voice about everything and then accuse the Democrats for not doing that. And we kind of know that that's not true about the Republicans. They don't all speak with one voice. That's the other one. Is the conflation view is the unspoken one is, and we don't do that. Yeah, we are. We're all together now, and we're all where we go one, we go all.
This suggestion that people who are part of the same group must all think the same way, and I can rely on that. Is kind of part of this, and that's why there was constant questioning of Biden in the run up to the election about defunding the police, despite the fact he did not run on defunding the police at all, and said that he wasn't running on it, and in fact his plans and what he followed through on increased funding to the police, whereas Trump's economic plan that he did come up with before actually did cut funding to the police. So but the fact that there were some Democrats who did say we need to defund the police, meaning we need to demilitarize the police and divert some of the money that they have into social funding, care and have ways of dealing with mental health issues that aren't a guy with a gun going into the situation. But that's obviously way more nuanced, and so the unfortunately very malleable phrase "defund the police" was used to describe it.
So, in fact, there's a conflation there in what the meaning of defund the police is. So there's two viewpoints. So what you're saying when people say, "Oh, you mean defund the police," you're conflating your view of defund the police with somebody else's view of defund the police and not doing the nuanced differences.
I don't know.
This is a marvellous multi-layered thing.
Maybe that's it. I don't know. Who knows? We're making it up as we go along. So sure. What the hell? So
they're all there.
So our third example from Trump World comes from Candace Owens, and this was during the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, which is sadly now over. I mean, I'm glad it's over, but not the way it went.
Not unexpected, but what the fuck?
She tweeted, "The kind of people who thought O.J. Simpson was innocent are the same people who believe that Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty. Facts don't matter to emotionally indoctrinated zombies, only feelings do."
Wow. Well, actually, that's quite that's got the last two lines are actually the kind of explanation of why this fallacy exists, isn't it? Isn't it that facts don't matter, only feelings do? So what you need to do is, you know how you feel about X, well, that applies to this bunch of people Y. So, Y equals X, and you can feel really angry about it. Yeah, because you're emotionally indoctrinated.
So,
whereas facts, like actually some Democrats said this, some Democrats said that. The defunding means this over here, it means that over there. He did actually pay for more police in your sense of the term of funding. Trump didn't. His plan was to reduce the funding, so in another sense, that's defunding. But those kind of facts don't matter. You're quite right, Candace. They don't. People like you.
So this was pretty difficult to research, actually, because it was extremely hard to find anyone who expressed the opinion that O.J. Simpson was innocent.
Yeah. Except for maybe O.J. himself.
Yeah.
I guess you could poll him.
And I don't know what O.J. thinks about Kyle.
O.J.? Yeah.
So that meant that basically what Candace has done is assumed that Democrats believe Kyle is guilty because they don't listen to the facts, which is not how that works, and that Democrats think O.J. Simpson's innocent. I'm not sure where she gets that from.
No. Who are the people that thought O.J. was innocent? Complete, rabid fuckwits, who emotionally indoctrinated zombies. Yeah, those people. Yeah. Those people who you wouldn't have tried, well, they're the same people that think he's guilty. It was such an outrageous view to hold. That's what I'm taking that view and I'm applying that to people who believe that Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty. But you've got, surely you have to back that up with some facts.
I think the thing is, the most generous you could possibly be is that the system works in such a way that the prosecution didn't necessarily meet their burden of proof in the O.J. Simpson trial because of various issues with, police corruption and things like that.
Right.
And that's why he was found not guilty, was because the burden wasn't met by the prosecution. And in the same way, the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict came down because the prosecution didn't meet the burden, which in Wisconsin requires them to prove it wasn't self-defense beyond reasonable doubt, which is a bizarre system. In Wisconsin, once self-defense is asserted as a defense, it becomes the burden on the prosecution to prove it wasn't self-defense, which is not how it works in lots of other places.
In the rest of the world.
Yeah. So,
well, I did it in self-defense. How come you murdered this person, right? Purely self-defense. Oh, right.
Yeah. And ultimately that kind of, although there's still a lot of questions, which we may deal with in another episode.
Not just now. Yeah.
Ultimately is why the verdicts came out the way it did, but that isn't the same as believing OJ was innocent or believing Kyle's guilty.
No. And I think that's far more nuanced than Candace Owens is capable of.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a conflation of views. I think that's just true. That's got, yeah.
But yeah, it's
Candace
a weird
and her
and in
Twitter
that
limit
thing, what she's doing is the kind of guilt by association thing of saying people who thought OJ Simpson were innocent are obviously idiots.
Yeah.
They're the same people, the same kind of people who believe Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty. Therefore, if you believe Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty, you're as much of an idiot as people who think OJ was innocent.
Yeah.
With no basis, obviously, in any of it.
And now is the time, I think, for Mark's British politics corner.
Well, it's very hard in British politics to find anyone that goes to the extent to say these people are like those people. I think it's because they're a bit wary of people calling them out to say, well, you've just drawn a comparison that is invalid. So they kind of don't do that, which is even more scary because it feels like it's the truth and you have to do a little bit of picking away at it to go, wait a minute, what you've just done is conflate the views of this lot with the views of that. What you're doing is telling me that these people are like those people, but without saying as much, which is quite scary. So we're going to go back to our friend of the show, Home Secretary Priti Patel, and just as Trump conflated the accidental shooting of Catherine Steinle by Garcia Zarate with the view that all Mexicans are therefore killers, here's Home Secretary Priti Patel in the wake of the Liverpool taxi bomb on the 15th of November, as she's appealing for space for the investigation to be completed.
There's a live investigation taking place right now. They all need the time, the space to do the work that they are doing in terms of investigating the incident. But of course, we as a government, I as Home Secretary, continue to work with everyone when it comes to the security of our country and making sure that we're taking all the necessary steps required.
So what that means, all the necessary steps required, is despite saying appealing for calm and saying, actually, let's just let the investigation go on, what she has done and what's necessary for her government to do is 2 days later, when she was speaking to reporters on a flight to Washington, is to jump to a conflation of views about terrorists and just plain asylum seekers. And she said these people have come to our country and abused British values, abused the value of the fabric of our country and our society. And as a result of that, there's a whole industry that thinks it's right to defend these individuals that cause the most appalling crimes against British citizens, devastating their lives, blighting communities. And that is completely wrong. So what she's done is casually and calculatingly conflates asylum seekers more broadly with dangerous criminals, whilst frantically shoveling blame away from her department. And she does this by also conflating human rights lawyers with a broken system. And the whole point of her, what she's saying is to do that, is to say, okay, these human rights lawyers, the kind of people that are human rights lawyers, what they're doing is defending a broken system. And she talks about that. She says, in the same interview, the case in Liverpool was a complete reflection of how dysfunctional, how broken the system has been in the past and why I want to bring changes forward. Problematic bit of that is the past, because that's the politician whose party has been in power for 11 years now, and that's why it's their system. That's what it's... Yeah, why is it broken? We've talked about this before. And she says a whole sort of professional legal services industry has based itself on rights of appeal, going to the courts day in, day out at the expense of the taxpayers through legal aid. So she's conflating the pointless spending of... She's appealing to the taxpayer to say, well, you're defending these people and it's at our expense. And it's the same narrative that she was peddling in September 2020 at the Tory party conference. And this is the clip from that.
Under Conservative leadership, the United Kingdom has and always will provide sanctuary when the lights are being switched off on people's liberties, providing a safe haven to the most in need. From the expulsion of Ugandan Asians from a repressive regime to proudly resettling more refugees from outside Europe than any other EU country, to supporting campaigners fleeing political persecution in Hong Kong. And for those defending the broken system, the traffickers, the do-gooders, the lefty lawyers, the Labour Party, they are defending the indefensible. And that is something I will never do.
So apart from the irony of proudly resettling refugees and defending activists, what she's doing is conflating lawyers with lefty do-gooders and worse, the Labour Party, with the broken system, because they're defending the broken system. So these, in her view, the people that are working as part of a system that grants people the right of asylum and the right of appeal, international human rights kinds of stuff, the people that do that are the same kind of people that are defending a broken system. They're broken system defenders, which is awful. But you kind of think the system is the broken system is your system. In looking at the reason why she's kind of saying this stuff and continuing this narrative that they invented over a year ago is part of that they invented this narrative over a year ago and done nothing about it. It's nothing to do with lawyers defending the indefensible. The Liverpool bomber Al Swealmeen was reportedly refused asylum in 2014 and lost an appeal in a lower court and had his attempt to appeal to a higher court rejected. And yet he's somehow managed to stay in the country. So this is like 2014, 2017 at latest. And the Home Office source offered to the Independent, where this is reported, that there were many varied reasons.
So the extent of the system being broken was what happened after the courts did their job properly.
Yes.
And that bit, which is enforcement, is squarely under the Home Secretary's purview.
It's nothing to do with lawyers, lefty do-gooders and lefty lawyers, or the Labour Party, but firmly in the remit of the Home Office. Yes. And court records for the cases indicate that Al Swealmeen was not legally represented when appeals against his asylum case decision came before the courts. According to those records, he represented himself as the cases progressed. Which
self-lawyer.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Quite attempting to go too good. Yeah, with a fool as a client. This suggests that if he ever did receive legal advice, it would have been at the early stages, and any legal representatives that were involved then removed themselves from the case before it came to a court hearing.
It's these do-gooding pro se defendants that are ruining the system.
Yeah. Ruining the system.
Defending themselves.
They're defending a broken system. Yeah, exactly. And furthermore, the president of the Law Society of England and Wales, Stephanie Boyce, said to The Independent, when people are subject to a life or death decision, they should have a right of appeal to make sure of a correct outcome. Fair enough. And that only half of asylum appeals were upheld, and it was not lawyers, but, as we suspect, poor Home Office decision-making coupled with catastrophic delays that are crippling the asylum system. Catastrophic delays not to deport the guy who failed to win his appeal against deportation in somewhere between 2014 and 2017, who's still in the country 4 years later, sufficient to detonate a bomb, but it's the fault of the people who are defending an indefensible system. Well, they're not.
Yeah, the system did its job. The court system, at least, did its job.
Yeah,
the ones she's complaining about.
It said, no, you've got no right of asylum here. You really ought not to be here. Particularly with your bomb-making proclivities, you should not be here. Your appeal is unsuccessful. Off you go. I've seen the views of just one group get brushed across them all, always get denied the rule of law. I watch that fall while the PM hides. But I find there is no difference. To me, they're all the same. They're fallacies, and they're in the wild. To me, they're all the same. Johnny Cash there with They're All the Same from his 1985 hit album.
So in the Fallacy in the Wild, we like to talk about the Fallacy of the Week from a non-political perspective. And this week we start with one of Trump's favourite movies, apparently, Gone with the Wind.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Because it's all about slavery and the South and white supremacy. Yeah. Go with that.
And in this scene, this is after Scarlett has taken over a sawmill, which she is kind of ruling with an iron fist, and she is doing business with the Yankees, which is Melanie is not happy about.
But Scarlett, you're doing business with the same people who robbed us and tortured us and left us to starve.
All that's past, Nellie, and I intend to make the best of things, even if they are Yankee things.
people coming here and buying lumber, the same people that tortured us and robbed us and raped us and pillaged us.
Yeah, from the perspective of the movie, the Yankees did treat the hero people, Melanie and Scarlett and Tara and all of the people we care about in the movie, poorly at best in the first kind of 2 hours of the movie.
Yeah.
And now Scarlett is doing business with people who are also from the north of the country. And Melanie is saying it's the same people. It's, not necessarily the same people. Probably isn't the same people. It's probably now businessmen that she's doing business with, and people who are kind of moving to the south, and suggesting that because they are essentially just from the same part of the country, that therefore you should hold them with the same contempt as you would the actual individuals who caused us pain. Is this fallacy?
And if we've learned anything from Nelson Mandela, he actually said, well, the only way you can progress is to treat the same people that have treated you badly differently.
Yeah. So our second example is from a 90s movie called Breast Men, which is about the doctors who developed the silicone breast implant. And it, over the years, caused some problems for some people, and there were lawsuits that ensued. And this is a kind of moment of one of the lawyers, plaintiff's lawyer, against Dow Chemical in this case, I think.
Take a good look at that. That's what an explanted silicone breast implant looks like right there. Brought to you by the same people who brought you Agent Orange.
So, yeah, he's saying that the silicone breast implant that he has in a jar of like formaldehyde is brought to you by the same people who brought you Agent Orange. It's not in so many ways, but Dow as a company did both produce Agent Orange for the US government and also produced silicone breast implants. They didn't invent either of them.
Right.
But because they produced them both as a chemicals company. Basically, Dow were involved, Dow Corning, I think it was at the time, because they worked with silicon. They were a producer of silicon, and they had kind of done lots of silicon-based science. They were approached by the doctors who came up with the concept of the silicone breast implant and kind of worked together with them because it was a material they knew about.
Right.
So they ended up getting sued in class action and lost lots and lots and lots of money. And they also were one of the military contractors that supplied the US government with Agent Orange in and prior to Vietnam.
Which ironically was viewed by Americans at the time as a good thing.
Fiercely patriotic about it they were at the time.
Yeah, because that, and that's interesting that the view that was an amazingly good thing, as now kind of through the press, whatever, or the view changed such that was a bad thing. Sufficient to be able to say, these are the same people that brought you Agent Orange, and you know what that means. Yeah. Well, it's a bit like that conflation between AEG, the electrical goods company, and building stuff for Auschwitz.
Yeah, and that's true of things like Hugo Boss, because Hugo Boss, the company, made uniforms for the Nazis, designed uniforms for the Nazis. Not probably the same people who are designing clothes for Hugo Boss now. So,
there you go.
Yeah. By just suggesting that this thing was bad, they're the same people who did the bad thing. Therefore, this thing that I'm holding in a jar must be bad.
Must therefore be bad. Yes.
Was kind of a big part of his argument. And an unnecessary part of his argument, because at the time, although more recently they have decided that silicone implants weren't the cause of autoimmune disorders that it was believed at the time they were, they had the evidence that had come out at the time and the research that had been done to point to. So there's no need to kind of demonize it in that way.
No.
You can just say, look, here's the proof that these things are bad.
which kind of goes back to Candace Owens' tweet.
Yeah.
That actually, facts don't matter to emotionally indoctrinated zombies or the jury. Only feelings do.
Yeah.
So what he's doing is by doing that conflation, perhaps that there we go. Maybe that's a characteristic of this particular fallacy, is that, as with many of them that we've identified, is that what it does is bypass facts, shortcuts across the facts, and appeals directly to your emotion. It makes you, it allows you, encourages you to bring your own story to bear. So all you've got to say is Agent Orange, and we go, oh fuck no, that's terrible stuff. Therefore, it's a broken system and they're defending it. Oh, Jesus Christ, they must be bad guys, even though they're called do-gooders.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of thing.
And in what I've found in many cases with this one is that it seems to be kind of popular to use it in this kind of context where essentially you're trying to score points with a third party, with an audience, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's certainly the case in our third example, which is from The West Wing. This is from the episode called The Debate, which is between Arnold Vinnick and Matt Santos in the final season. And they're talking here about climate change.
That's why the market has always been a better problem solver than the government, and it always will be.
While you're trusting the market, we're burning fossil fuels more and more every day, and global warming is melting the polar ice.
The same people who told you that we were going to run out of oil by the end of the 20th century are now trying to scare us with global warming theories.
Vinnick there is saying that you don't need to worry about climate change because it's the same people who are telling you that global warming is a problem who told you that we would run out of oil by the beginning of the 21st century.
And we didn't.
Yeah, and we didn't. Therefore, that's absolutely supporting his argument that climate change is not a problem. The problem is, it wasn't the same people. Obviously, if you give it a second's thought, people who would be talking about whether there's going to be enough oil are geologists. People who are talking about global warming, not geologists. It doesn't take much to do that.
People who are going to vote in Vinnick,
they don't need to
right-wing industrialists.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The thing is, as I found with some examples, and when I was looking for examples with Trump, what he tends to do a lot is say, these people who think this are the same as the people who think this. They're the same people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what I found when I was kind of seeing if those were the same people is in many cases he'd made one of them up completely.
Oh, right.
So there was it wasn't really conflating views as such. It was making up one view and then conflating it with a group of people who think something different. And essentially that is kind of what Vinnick's doing, because he claims that the people who say climate change is a problem, global warming is a problem, are the same people who said we would run out of oil by the year 2000. And I found a paper from 2002 saying oil forecasts past and present, which looks at many, probably not all, but certainly many of the major forecasts that geologists and other groups made about when we would hit peak oil.
Yep.
Peak oil is when we have used about half of the assumed global kind of existing oil reserves. And they estimated based on, at the time, whether it was forecasts that were made in the 70s or forecasts that were made right up to when this paper was published in 2002, roughly how much oil there was. And generally people thought there were around 2,000 gigabarrels of oil,
right?
Like in existing in the earth. So peak oil was when we had used up 1,000 gigabarrels, or produced at least, and kind of were available for use. And at that point, that was kind of when the the global production of conventional oil would peak, and then it would decline over time. But it would take a while then to run out, essentially. So Vinnick is saying that people claimed we would run out of oil before 2000, and none of the forecasts at all thought that.
We would. Yeah.
In fact, there were only a few that claimed that we would hit peak oil before 2000. Even from 1972, they were saying oil is likely to become increasingly scarce from about the year 2000. The UN Conference on Human Environment in 1972 said it was likely that peak production will have been reached by the year 2000. The UK Department of Energy in 1976 said the peak would be about 2000. So a lot of these were saying that would be when we would hit the peak. No one was saying oil would run out by 2000.
Wow. Yeah.
So the view he is conflating with the people now saying global warming is a problem didn't even exist. But the ones who were saying saying scary stuff about when we would run out of oil weren't the same people. They tended to be people like Esso and BP and Shell. Because they're the ones who care when the oil is going to run out.
Exactly. And also possibly the Saudis would have been listening to that because they're the ones that control the price.
Yeah.
So if they are able to say, well, look, it's beginning to run out, so we're going to have to put the price up.
Yeah.
Yes. And we're delighted to say that Vinnick didn't win. Spoiler alert. Sorry, if you've not watched the last season of West Wing, he didn't win.
Yeah.
Didn't get in.
Alan Alda is fantastic, and
my God, he's brilliant. And that episode was broadcast live.
Yeah, so there were actually two versions of it. One for the East Coast,
and
the West Coast.
I want to see the other one because I've only ever seen the one that went out on the West Coast. I think. God, it would be so good.
So we're gonna play fake news, folks. I love the game. It's a great game.
I understand the game as well as anybody.
Yes, it's time for Fake News, the game where I read out 3 Trump quotes, 2 of which are real and 1 I made up, and Mark has to figure out which one is fake news.
Yeah, you see, the people who said I'd never win are the same people who spend $40 in one of those crane machines at the amusement park to win a $10 plush Squid Game character. So I wouldn't believe a word they say.
God, Squid Game, crane game, that sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd go for that.
But I think, if you... But I think the penalty for not getting the Squid Game character
they kill you.
Would be a bit harsher than just putting another 50 cents in. Yeah.
Still, it's worth the risk. So, our examples this week come from...
Right.
Trump has been doing the shows. He's gone on the circuit again because he is touting his new book. Because all presidents write a book.
Oh, now that's exciting.
Well, I would suggest it as the thing we should do for Q next.
Yeah.
But whereas, regular, normal presidents write a book because they, have stuff to say, Trump's done a picture book.
Of course he has.
He has done a coffee table book of pictures taken by the White House photographer during his
1,000 words.
Yes, but
let's face it,
he has written all of the captions.
He said, "This is a picture of me standing."
He didn't even need a ghost
in the rose garden.
Yeah, I can't remember which of the late night hosts said, but it's like kind of your third grade teacher saying he did all the captions himself. It's like didn't need any help.
Yeah. He wrote them all down in big Sharpie letters. Yeah. Isn't he a clever boy?
So he's been doing all of the sympathetic shows that will praise him and tell him what a great job he's done. He's done Mark Levin, he's done Hannity, he's done inevitably he will have called into Fox and Friends for an hour. And
and they've just put the phone down on the table. And left.
But he's kind of touting it to anyone who will tell him what a good boy he's been. And this is Hannity. He talked to Hannity. It was an amazingly hagiographic interview where Hannity kind of most of his questions were things like, how do you deal with the media who's so horrible and corrupt and evil to you and say such mean things that are completely not true?
Yeah. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
It's like softball questions, but instead of a softball, it's a marshmallow. It's amazing.
A big one. One of those big, huge
one of
ones
the
that have
large
choking warnings on the packet. Yeah. Okay.
So these were things that he touched on during that interview with Hannity, which, to be fair, covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
First of all, Afghanistan.
Okay.
He said, they left with all their equipment behind. They left brand new airplanes and brand new everything. They have more equipment. They have 700,000 machine guns and rifles and guns, and many of them are on the black market. They don't need that many. Many are on the black market. We had 28 Apache helicopters, the most incredible machine. And you know who's got them now? 2 of them each. Russia has 2, China has 2, because they're back engineering it so they can build the exact same helicopter.
That sounds suspiciously... Machine guns and rifles and guns. Okay. What's left after machine guns and rifles and guns?
And guns.
Okay. Yeah.
2.
All right. Okay.
Statement number 2. He said, if you look at the border, it's the worst. When I took over, it was terrible, and I fixed it. We had no drugs coming through, like the least drugs ever, by which I mean 40 years. And now it's the total opposite. Just this week they stopped a record, like a truck with an amount of fentanyl and crystal meth like nobody's ever seen. Bad stuff. And that's just the stuff they're catching. What about the rest? I had a great relationship with the president of Mexico. He liked me a lot. We got on very well.
Okay. It's one of his delightful... self-aggrandizing non sequiturs. Yeah. Okay, all right.
Statement number 3 is about the press.
Yeah.
He said, they are corrupt. They are, and I say it, and I don't want to say it much, but I say it, and I hope in the future I won't have to. They are the enemy of the people, and we could have a country that would be able to heal and get together, except the media ferments it. They are so corrupt, and I came up with the term fake news a long time ago. I don't know if I'll get credit for that, but that's okay. The fake news, but it's really the corrupt news. It's corrupt, what they do. And they're so important, it could be, important.
What the fuck is he talking about? Okay. Right. Yeah. I'm a little bit suspicious of foments. And I quite like his, I say it and I don't want to say it much, but I say it and I hope I won't have to. And his repeat of important. Yeah, okay. Trouble is, it's like AI. Every time I kind of point out the things that I suspect, those are the things that you improve upon next time so that you make them more Trump-like.
Yeah, I'm like the Terminator, like a learning machine.
Yeah, it just will not stop ever. Yeah. I'm going to have to crush you under a steam hammer and shove you into lava to stop you. Okay. The back engineering thing, quite like that. Machine guns and rifles and guns. You see, that could be a gym-sized Trumpism. And the ferments. Oh, no. Fentanyl crystal meth, I've just seen again. Okay. See, much as I like the non-sequitur at the end, I think that number 2 is the one that you made up.
Okay, and of the other 2, which are you more convinced by?
I'm more convinced by the machine guns and rifles and guns.
Oh my.
Oh my. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And number 1 is real.
They left with all their equipment behind. They left brand new airplanes and brand new everything. They have more equipment. You know, they have 700,000 machine guns and rifles and guns, and many of them are on the black market. They don't need that many. Many are on the black market. We had 28 Apache helicopters, the most incredible machine. And you know who's got them now? 2 of them each. Russia has 2, China has 2, because they're back engineering it so that they can build the exact same helicopter.
But what is that thing? They have 700 machine guns, many of them on the black market. They don't need that many.
Yeah, so he's saying that this is how...
the limit on the black market.
This is what was left by America in Afghanistan when they left, supposedly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the Taliban don't need 700,000 machine guns, so they are selling them basically on eBay, and and so you're funding the Taliban. And also
they've put them on Etsy. I think they've got a kind of like, sort of homemade black
and
market
also
machine guns.
2 helicopters for anyone who wants one, basically, or 2.
Yeah. Yeah. We had 28 pictures. Who's got them now? Well, 2 of it. Okay, so where are the other 24? That's the question.
Well, here's the thing.
Right. Any of that true?
Hang on. I'm just reading through it. No, none of it's true.
No. Okay.
No, not a single thing he said there is true.
Does he think it's true, or does he know full well that nobody's going to call him out on the shit he constantly spouts? A bit like you've got to have there's this massive pipe that comes out of the seawall, and it just spews shit out into the sea, and you go, well,
especially in Kent recently.
Yeah, we've got to have that. We just got, just don't go there. That's what it does. That's what it does. You just, and your kids are saying, well, why have we got that? I said, well, it's just we've got to get the shit out of the country somehow. That's the only way we can deal with it, and that's fundamentally what he is. So nobody kind of calls it out. They just go, We've got to have one. It's not, we can't really do anything about it. Best not draw attention to it.
So, let's go through it. They left with all their equipment behind. That doesn't even make any sense. But
they left with all their equipment behind. No.
But if it made sense, it still wouldn't be true, because for some time before the US left Afghanistan, they were shipping out equipment. They were sending equipment to other areas for the US military to use, or they were destroying, immobilizing, or demilitarizing equipment.
Putting beyond use.
Yes.
Yeah.
They left brand new airplanes and brand new everything. No, they didn't. There were no brand new airplanes. All of the airplanes that were left, and there were some airplanes left, were essentially unusable, either because they had kind of rendered them immobile, or because they were not the Taliban wouldn't have the ability or technology to be able to use them.
But they weren't certainly brand new.
No,
because
there were no brand new things.
Trump, who would have paid for new airplanes knowing that they were pulling out? Trump certainly didn't, because he was saying we need to pull out. He was the one that said, let's just make that clear, listeners. He was the one that said we should stop putting more money in and pull out. So he's not going to have paid for brand new aeroplanes to go in between him saying we should pull out and Biden pulling people out.
No, that would be idiotic. Also, they have 700,000 machine guns and rifles and guns, oh my.
More than one each.
Yeah. Well, when Biden took office in January 2021, there were 2,500 US troops in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So that's like 280 guns per person.
Each. And the military kind of doesn't work like that.
No, it seems like too many.
Get one. You get a little bit. You get one, and you look after it, don't you? Isn't that what we're what we've learned through watching stuff with Jake Gyllenhaal in. You just go, well, this is the one thing that you get, and you learn to you sleep with it, and you can take it apart blindfold and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You don't get.
This is my gun.
Yeah.
It's not. It's like all the other guns, but it's not the. Yeah. That's the thing.
You don't get 285 of them. This
you don't.
Is my
no,
gun.
no.
I've got 284 others.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to bother with this one. I'll just use it till it breaks. I won't even bother cleaning it. I'll just fuck it.
Yeah,
I'm just going to use it in one tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this seems to be an arbitrary doubling of a real number.
Oh, okay.
But that real number, which was actually 358,530 assault rifles, was the figure from a 2017 report from the US Government Accountability Office, which counted the number of rifles provided to Afghanistan, so to both the US military and all of the Afghan army who were fighting the Taliban.
Yeah.
Between 2004 to 2016.
Oh, wow.
So over that 12-year period, the US government provided over 350,000 assault rifles to the Afghan army and the US army in Afghanistan at the time, over 12 years. Obviously, they weren't all left behind.
Yeah, because they would have come back with each serving individual.
That doesn't count any guns that were then removed from Afghanistan over that period. Or since that period, from 2016 to 2020.
Right.
And even if it did, even if all of those were just for the US military, which they weren't, and they were left there, that's still half the number he said. And it would still be 140 per person in the US military.
Yeah.
So
which just doesn't happen.
Obviously not true. As for the Apache helicopters...
Right.
The Pentagon says there were no Apache helicopters left behind in Afghanistan.
Right.
At all.
Because they were the things that they would have used to fly people out with.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have gone back and just left them there.
A lot of the airplanes and helicopters, including some Black Hawks and others, they left because people were leaving, and some of those people were pilots.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I think that his claim that China and Russia had them is an example of accelerating truth, which is one of the other multiples of 11 episodes that we did. Because he said, Trump said in September, I guarantee that China and Russia already have our Apache helicopters and they're taking them apart to find out exactly how they're made. They're the best in the world by far. So that was him saying, I reckon.
Yeah. I reckon what I've just made up.
China and Russia have them because they probably left them behind, and now probably China and Russia have them. Yeah. And now he's saying, they've got two each, and they're reverse engineering them.
Yeah, it's
because he made it up.
Because he made it up. Other people have said it's been reported that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I heard it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure I made it up. Yeah. Oh. And of course, where's our Australian journalist when we need him?
Yeah,
to actually say, all these numbers of things, of facts that they're all just made up. No, you've got to look at the charts. What the charts that you've written with a Sharpie?
You can't ask me the question that you want to ask. Yeah.
No. You've got to look at the charts. Not those charts. These ones. That's Jesus Christ.
So you also think that number 3 is real?
I do, on the basis of it, despite the fact that he says immense. Yeah.
Number 3 is real.
They are corrupt. They are, and I say it, and I don't want to say it much, but I say it, and I hope in the future I won't have to. They are the enemy of the people. And we could have a country that would be able to heal and get together, except the media foments it. They're so corrupt. And, I came up with the term fake news a long time ago. I don't know if I'll get credit for that, but that's okay. The fake news, but it's really the corrupt news. It's corrupt what they do. And they're so important, it could be, important.
The fuck? There's all these little caveats. I say it, and I don't want to say it much, but it's like, I'm not being racist, but You know, I'm not being funny, but I'm not going to be funny. So I'm not racist, but I'm going to be racist. So I don't want to say it much, and now I'm going to say it a lot. And I hope in the future, what the fuck? Who does he think he's convincing? That's well, apart from Hannity, that's the kind of, it's like a horse coming up to a jump and then refusing and then go back and then go back. It's like a Lipizzaner horse doing the dancey bit in order to distract you, to say, see, I don't want to have to say this. And you go, okay, we forgive you for saying it because you've given all of the reasons why you don't have to say it. We will not hold you to account for having said it because it's a difficult and painful truth that you're revealing. And we know that it's difficult and we know that it's painful because you've told us how difficult and painful it is. Therefore, we will accept the truth and absolve you of all responsibility for having made the fucking thing up. And that's how you get away with it. Yeah.
I don't know. I think it is a version of a filler word. He doesn't say and a lot when he talks. And he doesn't tend to say kind of like and you know and things like that. So I think what he does, because people have this dislike of silence when you're trying to think of how to word.
I really like when Trump is silent.
Oh, yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
But when you are speaking and you're trying to think of the word that you want to use that will best put forward your point or make the most sense or describe how you're feeling exactly right.
Yeah.
People, rather than pause for a couple of seconds, will add in filler words. They'll say, you know, some people will just say, you know, all the time. I say or and I tend to cut a lot of those out in the edit.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that people just don't like the silence. And actually, if you're learning to do public speaking, it's a good idea to get comfortable with that couple of seconds of silence. Because actually,
it's quite powerful.
Yeah. When people are listening to you, it doesn't sound bad. It sounds like you are wanting to make sure that you're using the right words. And unless you have extended silence like Boris Johnson sometimes when he can't think of the next thing that he needs to say because he's lost his place in a speech.
He's been completely flummoxed by somebody asking him something.
But instead, I think Trump just keeps talking. He doesn't have the filler words that he inserts. He keeps talking as if everything he's saying is important and everything he's saying is intentional and part of what he was planning on doing in the first place.
Yeah.
But it's just a way of killing time and filling the silence until his brain kicks back in and he finishes his thought.
It's also the John Wayne School of Acting, is where you keep talking because the camera is on you.
Yeah.
And that's that very much Trump.
Yeah,
because conflating him with John Wayne, he's the kind of person that would just keep the camera. He's aware that the camera is rolling on him, and if he stops speaking, that's when they'll cut away.
Yeah,
and it also reminds me of Margaret Thatcher, who used to drop her voice at the end of a sentence, and people would take that as the end of a sentence, and then come in, and they would. She would actually drop her voice in mid-sentence. People would think it was the end of a sentence and come in, and she would get frustrated that she was being interrupted. So what she would do is not drop her voice at all, ever. So people would have to jump in and interrupt her, which would irritate her because they interrupted her. But he's exactly that. And I think she was taught that by Saatchi and Saatchi, the advertising people. So is that kind of the John Wayne thing? We need to occupy so you could say your lines as slow as you possibly can.
Yeah. Or
for as long as you possibly can, because the camera is rolling on you, and that's what people are paying for. And what the problem is, you fill the space up with shit that renders what you're saying meaningless.
Yeah.
Whereas the likes of Obama are really good at silences.
Well, Obama, you will hear him go, well, he's thinking of the next thing to say.
Yes, exactly.
He fills the space with noise. Yeah. Yeah.
But
now that I've realised that, I will be inserting that technique into my fake ones to make them harder to spot.
I know. God damn you. Yes.
Because I'm always learning.
I'm always learning. It's like bloody Skynet going on. Yeah.
But in the meantime, you did get that one correct. Number 2.
I know. Well, obviously,
fake news.
The foments. Even he did really enjoy saying foments.
Yeah,
didn't
he really. Yeah, he kind of. That's his word of the day. Toilet paper, isn't it? That he's kind of got that. It's like he really did enjoy doing that. But number 2. The truck that had a record amount of fentanyl and crystal meth on it is true. That did happen this week.
Right.
And it was stopped at the border by Border Patrol, doing their job. And it has been used by Republicans as an example of how the borders are
working.
Not working.
In need of.
Borders, borders are borders are not
it's
working.
Broken system.
Because look at all the drugs that the Border Patrol caught trying to get through the border.
Right. Well, that's surely that's what? No, yeah, the fact that people are stopping people bringing the drugs through is an indicator of the fact that the borders aren't working because people are bringing drugs through.
Yeah.
Well, no, they're not, because they're stopping them, bringing them through.
People being apprehended at the border and kind of stopped from getting into the country is way up, dramatically up since Trump. And that is again an indication that there's a huge border crisis, and everything has gone to shit.
What?
So,
because they're actually
because they're stopping people, catching them trying to get across the border.
They're kind of in some way solving the problem. Yeah. Far be it from me to say that. Yeah.
Which means ultimately that you are now on 40 out of 78.
Oh my God,
so that is the highest I think you've ever been.
It is. That's more than half, because that's 40 out of 80 is half, and that's a lot more. Well, there's some more. There I see. Yeah. You keep plugging away for getting your plush Squid Game figure. I'm on a roll. Yeah. Trouble is, the better I get at this, the better Jim gets.
Yes, it's time for the part of the show that this week at least is called Vaccine Detoxing is Not a Logical Fallacy. Because...
This is so good, isn't it?
Yeah, vaccine mandates work is kind of the upshot of this story. It is that when you tell people that they can't go out to a restaurant unless they have a vaccination, people, I really want to go to a restaurant, but I really don't believe in vaccines, but all right then. They get vaccinated, but because obviously vaccines are evil and will cause you to become either sterile, tracked by the government, or dead,
or a slave of Bill Gates.
Some of them, one or others. Because of them, they want to somehow find a way to deactivate the vaccine that they've been vaccinated with, or render it useless, or in some cases try and uninject the vaccine. So various kind of,
which has got to be cheaper basically than getting a fake vaccine pass.
That's the other alternative is to pay £400 for a fake vaccine card, which doesn't give you the thing on the NHS app that we use, at least, to prove that we are vaccinated if we need to. But so people are giving anti-vaxxers ideas of how to detox from the vaccine.
Brilliant. We should have seen this coming and invested in it straight away. We could have done it so convincingly. I've got a white coat. What more do you need? I've got a stethoscope.
Yeah,
that
is clearly trustworthy.
So
the one that has been kind of in the news, it was covered by NBC, is a TikTok video from a doctor, an osteopath.
Yeah. Okay.
But she's technically a doctor, called Carrie Madej, who has outlined the ingredients for a bath that she reckons you can take after your vaccine to detox.
Okay.
And the ingredients of the bath are baking soda and Epsom salts, which she reckons will provide a radiation detox to remove radiation from that is activated by the vaccine.
Okay. Okay. It might relax your muscles.
Yeah. This
know,
is
like hot baths generally do.
So this is fractally wrong. This is at every
tiny little
level
bit
of
is
zooming.
wrong. It doesn't matter. Yeah. You can zoom in, it's wrong. You zoom out, it's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, fractal wrongness has been described by some people as a logical fallacy. So maybe it's something we cover. I'm not quite convinced it's a fallacy rather than just, someone not being right. It's not.
Yeah. Something really, really true. Yeah. Not so much a fallacy.
Since it does appear on some lists, maybe we'll cover it at some point because there are plenty of examples of Trump being fractally wrong. But there isn't radiation in the vaccine. The vaccine doesn't initiate or activate any radiation in you,
or contain any that you put.
And if it did, bathing in baking soda and Epsom salts wouldn't have any effect on that.
No. Just as it doesn't if you get exposed to gamma rays or, from a nuclear explosion or anything like that. Oh, yeah, have a nice hot bath. That will deal with it. No.
Yeah.
Doesn't work like that.
No.
Yep.
So, but that's not the only ingredients in the bath. That would just be a pleasant bath. Baking soda.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit fizzy on the
bit fizzy
on certain parts. But but she also includes bentonite clay, which apparently will add a major pool of poison.
Okay. What is bentonite clay? What is bentonite?
That's a good question.
I've got to Google bentonite.
Bentonite, yeah.
Bentonite.
See, I'm not a clay aficionado personally, so.
Well, it's an absorbent swelling clay consisting. This doesn't help. Consisting mostly of Montmorillonite.
Oh wow! Okay.
Which I guess comes from Montmorillon, which is in France.
Right.
But yeah, it's basically it's a volcanic ash.
Okay. So
basically, volcanic. If you put volcanic ash in seawater, you get clay. It's one of those things that forms the basis of one of those kind of slightly tall white screw top things that has got some sort of atomic symbol on the front that you buy from, and it says detox 200 grams and it's £12.99.
So grifter clay
grifter clay, perfect.
Clay that they can charge you money for.
Exactly. Yes.
That apparently will also remove the poison that does not exist in the vaccine.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And also if it did contain poison, wouldn't remove it in any way.
No. No. How would it?
But and then you add a cup of borax, which is a cleaning product.
Well, that's the active ingredient in detergent.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. It's pretty
which
strong.
For the longest time was
chemical.
mined in Death Valley by the Chinese in the 1800s.
It's an irritant to the skin or to the eyes.
Yes.
So maybe not the best thing to bathe in, but
and what does that do? Why would you shove
just
that
detox generally?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but isn't it not specifically to take nanotechnologies out of you?
You mean the nanotechnologies that don't exist in the vaccine? Yes.
Yeah.
Those
are easily removed.
Dr. Carrie Madej claims
from watching any sci-fi movie you care to mention how you get rid of nanotech that's been pumped into you by future technologists or whilst you're sleeping. In the Matrix, what you do is just you bathe in a cup of borax.
Yeah, she says that there is a liquefied computing system.
That is brilliant,
included.
I love
free
that.
with every vaccine.
Yeah,
it's pretty
liquefied computing.
Awesome. that.
That's you know that bit where the new Terminator that looks like a security guard goes through the bars. Yeah, that's liquefied.
Liquefied computing
liquefied
system.
computing. Yeah. That's what that is.
She also says that the vaccines are a gateway to transhumanism.
Nice.
Which I don't think she defines transhumanism, but I believe it's generally intended to mean just the transition between being a human and not being a human.
Oh, okay.
Being something.
So and the amount of episodes of Star Trek, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
The weird bit is a gateway to transhumanism.
So it's not the actual one.
No, it won't make you not human, but it's like the gateway. It's like smoking compared to smoking pot.
Yeah, or pot versus heroin.
Once you get the COVID vaccine, then you'll just get
a gateway drug.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gateway drug.
You'll feel compelled somehow to get other vaccines, which will make you not
human. Liquid computing that will make you transhuman. Yeah, that's it. It's a slippery slope. Yeah.
So NBC asked an actual scientist,
right,
called Angela Rasmussen,
an actual doctor, yeah,
who is a virologist and adjunct professor at the University of Saskatchewan, and she said, once you're injected, it's started. The process of saving your life or by preventing you getting ill has already started. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't unring a bell, she said. You can't take out the vaccine. You can't deactivate it in some way.
Yeah.
She says, apart from the borax, sounds like a nice bath. Have a glass of wine and relax in a
be fine.
Bath. But
I like the bit. She also says, but you go for your vaccine. By the time you get to your car, it's already started.
Yeah.
The magic has begun. I think it's a kind of ill-advised. It's probably a satirical use of the word magic.
Yeah, but the smart thing that people are doing,
right,
to avoid all of this problem with trying to get rid of the vaccination after you've had the vaccination, is to not have the vaccination, but somehow fake as if you have had it.
And
in Greece, this has been a thing recently where people have been paying doctors to inject them with saline or water and write down that it was the vaccine.
Right.
And so they've been bribing doctors and nurses to do this. Apparently the going rate is about €400.
Remind me again, how much does it cost to get the vaccine?
Yeah, it's free. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So getting the actual medicine is free. Getting some saline is €400.
But they're still getting the injection.
They're getting the injection
of the saline.
Yeah.
So why don't they just pay them not to give them the injection?
Yeah.
And just say that they have.
I don't know if they think there's like CCTV in there or something.
Checking whether they've got a hole, punctured in their arm and something shot into it. What? Yeah.
I'm not clear on why they are going through with the whole rigmarole of actually being injected with something.
Yeah, going somewhere, booking that, paying somebody to do it, and then getting it done.
Yeah.
And having the pain of a jab, just a small prick. No, you're a fucking enormous cock. That's what you are.
But apparently, some of these doctors are a bit worried that they might get in trouble for taking a bribe and injecting people with water and claiming it was the vaccine.
Yeah.
So they've taken the bribe that they're fine with.
Brilliant. Yeah.
But they've injected them with the real vaccine.
The actual vaccine. That is brilliant. That is great. So both of them are happy. But fundamentally, that's the perfect solution, isn't it? Because the anti-vaxxer has paid their money and is convinced that they've not been vaccinated, and in their ignorance, go away and go about the business and are fine.
Yeah.
And of course, they behave as though they've been vaccinated. They get all of the trappings of those that have been vaccinated. And
because they have actually been vaccinated.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. And the health service benefits by €400. That's fantastic.
And while this is kind of technically assault...
What? Right. Okay. Yeah, give you that. Yeah.
There's probably not much chance that it's going to be prosecuted, essentially, because if the person who thought they weren't going to be vaccinated finds out and wants to bring an action against the doctor, they have to admit that they tried to bribe the doctor to give them not a real vaccination.
Brilliant. Because, yes, exactly, because they're under the impression that they've hoodwinked the system. That is perfect.
Yeah.
We could run the entire health service on that basis. Let's do that. Yeah. So basically the upshot is just get vaccinated. It's much easier. It's much cheaper. Yeah. So it's much cheaper.
You don't need to worry about all this shit.
Yeah, it's free and you haven't got to worry about any of that. And actually what it will do is help you in your battle against possibly getting COVID. And finally, some things we really don't have time to talk about.
As we mentioned earlier, Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty, which is pretty shit. The Opening Arguments podcast and the Legal Eagle YouTube channel both have excellent episodes covering just what happened, but instead I want to talk about the bizarre right-wing hero worship of a teenager who, in the kindest possible interpretation of events, killed 2 unarmed men because he was scared they would take his gun and then they would have a gun. This makes him such an alpha male in the eyes of a party where Trump is seen as manly that the worst Congress people you can name are literally challenging each other to contests of strength to decide who gets to employ him as an intern. Matt Gaetz was quick off the mark to offer him the job, which is weird because he's 18 now, which I thought was a bit old for Matt. And then Paul Gosar offered to arm wrestle Matt Gaetz to settle the matter, presumably thinking that his dentistry-endowed body language skills would give him some kind of advantage. Madison Cawthorn displayed his impressive originality by issuing the exact same challenge to Lauren Boebert, who then went on Newsmax to instead challenge the wheelchair-bound Cawthorn to a sprint to win the honour of employing a kid with fatally poor judgment. I say let's up the stakes. Get together every single congressperson who is even slightly interested in having Rittenhouse as their intern and fight to the death. Last one standing wins, and America gets a government with slightly fewer craven pieces of shit. Speaking of craven pieces of shit, Marjorie Taylor Greene has now introduced a bill to award Rittenhouse a Congressional Gold Medal, the highest honour Congress can bestow on a civilian. This, by the way, is the very same Marjorie Taylor Greene who voted against awarding congressional gold medals to the law enforcement officers who protected the US Capitol on January 6th.
Looking like a fat mid-alien transformation Vickers van der Merwe from District 9, My Pillow chief and rabid pro-Trump conspiracy theorist Mike Lindell now blames his lack of filing his awesome election fraud complaint to the Supreme Court on yet more interference from outside. This time it's not the obvious opponents, Newsmax or Fox News, or even invisible ones like Antifa, but this time the actual Republican Party itself. Apparently, because head of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, last week finally made a statement that Biden won the election 10 months after he took office and 3 days before Lindell was due to submit the complaint. Nothing to do with Lindell not having written anything, of course, or that he couldn't muster any state attorneys general to sign it, despite flying from coast to coast pretty much since Trump lost the election, but not one to back down from a delusional pursuit. Remember his withdrawn $5 million reward to anyone who could disprove his non-existent 37 terabytes of irrefutable evidence that the Chinese flipped all the states in the election. He said he's going to publish the contents of his Supreme Court filing by Thanksgiving anyway. Yeah, because that'll make all the state attorneys general change their mind for sure. The Daily Beast had the journalistic integrity to ask him a couple of days later about his non-existent Supreme Court filing and why it hasn't been made public, only to be told by Lindell in a very Trumpian way, "Are you out of your mind? You call me again, I'm suing you." A real foam-filled chip off the old blockhead, ain't you, Mike?
The January 6th committee has been busy issuing subpoenas again, with the latest round including Roger Stone, Alex Jones, and members of the Oath Keepers' right-wing militia organisation. Given Steve Bannon's recent indictment, it seems likely they'll keep the appointment, but both have already said that they will probably plead the fifth in response to any questions. The committee is probably also going to want to speak to Amy and Kylie Kremer, who run Women for America First, a group that helped plan the protest that boiled over into an insurrection. Rolling Stone reported last week that Kylie Kremer had an aide buy 3 burner phones and said it was, quote, of the utmost importance that they pay with cash.
Wow.
They then exclusively used these phones to talk with Mark Meadows, Eric Trump, and other members of the administration, which is exactly the kind of behaviour that any normal law-abiding person does when they're arranging a legal gathering. Definitely nothing to see here, no reason to investigate.
Move along. Last Thursday evening and through Friday morning, in what was effectively a Twitter fact-checking service, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi included the tweet, House Democrats are preparing to pass landmark legislation to lower costs, fight inflation, and make big corporations and the wealthiest pay their fair share. But Kevin McCarthy is welcome to keep getting facts wrong on the House floor. Plus, she had to hand over her pinball crown to him for speaking the longest. She previously held the record for speaking for 8 hours and 7 minutes on an immigration reform bill. Kevin spoke from 8:38 p.m. to 5:10 a.m., 8 hours, 32 minutes, in an impassioned way about the merits of not building back better, not making healthcare and prescriptions cheaper. Nah, not even that. He moaned about not being able to afford a Tesla, wishing he'd seen Tiananmen Square and the Berlin Wall come down, how he had his booster jab and now a headache, Abraham Lincoln and the best portraits in his office. Adam Schiff neatly summed it up. If you took the worst orator in the world, gave him the worst speech in the world and made him read it for the longest time in the world, that would be a lot like listening to Kevin McCarthy tonight, except probably better. When asked what was the point of it all, Republican Dan Newhouse told The Independent, I've no idea. The bill passed 2:20 to 2:13, shortly before 10 a.m. on the Friday.
Yet another person subpoenaed by the January 6th committee is Bernie Kerik. Trump had something to say about that one, and he issued the following statement. The Unselect Committee issued a subpoena to Bernie Kerik, an American patriot and great former police commissioner of New York City, for its January 6th witch hunt. But it didn't realize what they were demanding is a massive trove of evidence of voter fraud. According to Bernie's lawyer, these documents show significant indicators of fraud in the 2020 presidential election scam, but have remained hidden from the public. It's exactly what the Unselect Committee should be interested in if this was a real investigation. Bernie wants to comply with the subpoena with a public hearing and asked me to waive attorney-client privilege so Bernie can testify and provide documents, which I grant him. The Unselect Committee will not like what they asked for. Now, there's a lot to unpack there, not least the question of what the fuck Trump thinks attorney-client privilege is, since neither he nor Kerik is an attorney.
Yeah.
Since we're asking questions, I'd add why they have kept this massive trove of voter fraud evidence hidden. Were they just hoping someone would subpoena it so they could point and laugh and shout, ha, checkmate, libtards? Finally, there's Trump's definition of an American patriot. This is a man who, when he was New York Police Commissioner post 9/11, used taxpayer funds to set up an apartment for 9/11 first responders, but actually used the apartment to carry on 2 separate affairs, then went to work for the Bush administration, where he took a $250,000 bribe from an Israeli billionaire, and was ultimately indicted on 8 counts of tax fraud and sentenced to 4 years in prison, and then Trump pardoned him in 2020. So, yeah, awesome American patriot.
Yeah. Remember the voter fraud that Trump convinced everyone with? Well, the Republicans, because they lost basically, and let's face it, even when they won first time round. Anyway, the Republicans were so convinced that they investigated it all over, and turns out it was them who done it. Rosemary Hartle's vote in the last presidential election, 3 years after her death, was trumpeted in November 2020 by the Nevada Republican Party as proof of the fraud. The mystery has been solved. On Tuesday, her widower, Donald Kirk Hartle, pleaded guilty to the crime of voting more than once in the same election. The judge, 8 News Now reported, said Hartle had pulled what seemed like a cheap political stunt that kind of backfired and shows that our voting system actually works because you were ultimately caught. And it has caught Republican miscreants before, too. In November 2020, the Trump campaign highlighted a case in which a ballot was cast in the name of a long-dead Pennsylvanian woman. Her son later pleaded guilty to casting that ballot for Trump, saying he had listened to too much propaganda and made a stupid mistake. In Ohio, a Republican official admitted to forging a signature to cast a ballot under the name of his recently deceased father. He told NBC News it was an honest error, and also he'd simply been trying to execute a dying man's wishes. In Colorado, a man who was charged in 2021 with murdering his wife, who had disappeared in May 2020, was also charged with illegally casting her ballot for Trump in the November election. He allegedly told FBI agents he'd submitted the ballot because he thought all those other guys are cheating, and his wife would have voted for Trump anyway. When approached by CNN, the Nevada Republican Party refused to comment on all this, doing the usual thing of throwing sensational claims into the public realm before the actual facts are known, then, if convenient, actual facts eventually emerge, quietly moving on to the next sensational claim, confident that the truth will never reach a good chunk of the Republican base, dead or alive.
Yeah, in fact, a week after the election in 2020, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, offered $1 million from his campaign account, not his money, but from donor funds to incentivize, encourage, and reward people to come forward and report voter fraud. So he was basically offering a bounty on people reporting voter fraud. Did
it have to be backed up with any kind of truth, facts, or evidence?
You would assume so, yeah. So that
$1 million at stake. Yeah,
exactly. So he just paid out last month the first reward that presumably met all of the criteria. $25,000 he paid out to a Democrat in Pennsylvania who reported a Republican for voting twice.
Nice. Nice. It's so good, isn't it? When it just comes back to bite them. It's, be careful what you wish for.
It's always fun to hear about insurrectionists who have left the fuck around part of the equation far behind and are now squarely in the find out part. Like QAnon shaman Jacob Chansley, for example, who has now been sentenced to 41 months in prison, although he's now hired Rittenhouse's lawyer for a possible appeal. Given that his claims that he was entirely peaceful were somewhat undermined by video played at the trial of him in the Senate chamber shouting, "Time's up, motherfuckers," I don't think ineffective counsel was his problem. Insurrectionist John Lolos won't really be able to claim that either, since he completely ignored his lawyer's advice to shut the fuck up and went on a 20-minute rant immediately prior to sentencing in which he claimed the, quote, smallest police officer I've ever seen in my whole life encouraged him to trespass in the Capitol building, and that he only went through the broken window to talk to the police. The judge didn't buy his claims of leprechaun cops and said, "You thought the way to get to a designated protest area was through a broken window?" Meanwhile, Trump's July claim that there were no guns whatsoever at the protest have been debunked, again, with the charging of insurrectionist Mark Mazza, who, like so many others, helpfully tweeted a video of him insurrectioning. He carried with him a Taurus Judge, a revolver which can fire both regular .45 ammo and shotgun shells, both of which Mazza was carrying that day. When the FBI picked him up, he said he'd been hoping to find Nancy Pelosi, but now he was glad he hadn't because, quote, "you'd be here for another reason." But sure, peaceful protest, just tourists taking a look at the Capitol, no harm done, and it was mostly Antifa and BLM anyway.
Meanwhile, on this side of the pond, this week in Sick Man of Europe Ireland, governed by what former Tory Minister Ken Clarke described as an elected dictatorship, Priti Patel continues to mither about taking back control of our borders by complaining that the French aren't doing enough to control our borders, and blaming the 27 migrants who drowned this week attempting to cross the Channel for wanting to live in the UK. The Tories are finally seen to be the caring, sharing party that they aren't by reneging on the vow that you won't have to sell your house to afford care in your old age, but only if you're poor. So that's not really reneging on those people who count/donate to the party. They also reneged on building large chunks of the HS2 high-speed rail link to and across the north of England. You know, that thing that's been planned for decades in parts of the country they recently won votes in and promised to level up. But they won't vote Tory next time, so that doesn't matter. Despite his press office saying they were not going to sue the newspaper The European for publishing comments made by him to a colleague that he was experiencing buyer's remorse over marrying Carrie, Boris continues to appear to be in a COVID friendship bubble with everyone in the country when he went to the theatre not wearing a mask after having been asked to wear one. And so, as Boris's Churchill impression coughs, stumbles and falls, we are faced with the prospect that Starmer is trying to become Clement Attlee, with all the post-war promise that shaped the then Labour Party's policies on health, welfare, housing, workers' rights, nationalisation, education and the economy. You know, all those progressive socialist policies that Corbyn espoused and that Starmer has spent his leadership determined to destroy the memory of. After 2 years of Boris's premiership, and on the anniversary of Corbyn's suspension as a Labour MP, Labour are massively way out in equal with the Tories on 37% of the sharing of voting intent. It's going to be a long wait for 2024.
So that's all the bad arguments and faulty reasoning we have time for this week. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving weekend and plenty of good arguments with your conservative, shitty relatives. You'll find the show notes at fallacioustrump.com, and if you hear Trump say something stupid and want to ask if it's a fallacy, our contact details are on the contact page.
God help us. God save us from toxic family gatherings. If you think we've used the fallacy ourselves, let us know. And if you've had a good time, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can support the show at patreon.com/ftrump. Just like our strawman level patrons Kaz Tui, Steve Bickle, Schmutz, Mark Reiki and Amber R. Buchanan. And our true Scotsman level patrons Max Beaver and our top patron Lauren. Thanks very much for continuing to support us. It's very much appreciated.
You can connect with those awesome people as well as us and other listeners in the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/fallacioustrump.
All music is by The Outbursts and was used with permission. So till next time on Fallacious Trump, we'll leave the last word to the Donald.
That's right. Go home to mommy. Bye. Bye.